Marcus Hale's first conscious thought was that something about zero gravity made everything smell faintly of almonds and panic. He drifted midair, limbs flailing like an uncoordinated marionette, trying to orient himself, until he realized he was suspended in a translucent pod of some shimmering liquid that refused to obey gravity or common sense. The walls of the chamber rippled as if the structure itself were breathing, exhaling and inhaling in a rhythm too deliberate to be accidental. Somewhere above him or below, a soft, melodious hum resonated through the fluid, vibrating his teeth and reverberating in his chest in ways he wasn't sure were physiological or hallucinatory. When the door, or rather the opening that didn't really have a door, glided open, he saw her, Queen Leora. She stepped forward with the grace of someone walking through air that hated physics as much as she did. Her hair flowed around her shoulders, catching light that didn't seem to have a source, and her ears, long and tapering, curved upward like delicate sails ready to catch cosmic winds. There was a gleam in her eyes that suggested amusement, menace, or perhaps a desire to see how many times he could trip in zero gravity before fainting. Marcus decided it was best to assume all three simultaneously. "I trust the accommodations are satisfactory," she said, her voice silk stretching over steel, laced with humor that felt almost malicious. Marcus blinked. "Accommodations. I'm floating in a vat of whatever this is while your ship hums like it's performing a full-body scan on me. Yeah, it's cozy." Leora's laugh rippled through the chamber, echoing like wind through alien chimes. "You have the human sense of humor, dangerous but entertaining." Marcus tried to bow but misjudged the gravity or anti-gravity and ended up spinning like a confused satellite. He caught himself just in time to avoid ramming his head into what might have been a wall, or the side of her throne, which glimmered with circuitry and living matter intertwined in ways that would make a human architect question their life choices. "You humans always react with clumsy theatrics," she remarked, voice playful. "It's why I find you intriguing." Marcus swallowed. "Intriguing can also mean dinner," he said, because apparently human sarcasm was his default defense mechanism. Leora tilted her head, ears flicking in a motion that seemed part curiosity, part exasperation. "I have considered it, but your species' humor might be worth the risk, especially if you are willing to cooperate." "Cooperate?" Marcus asked, already guessing that cooperation in her lexicon meant more than handing over a weapon or your secrets. "Cooperate as in, I follow your orders, you don't vaporize me in the next 5 minutes." Leora stepped closer, and the air or its equivalent in this pod chamber shifted around her like a gentle current. "Cooperate as in, you remain by my side, as a companion, trusted. A witness to galactic negotiations, cosmic crises, and occasionally my attempts at culinary experiments." "Culinary experiments?" Marcus choked. "I've survived 2 asteroid bombardments and a rogue plasma cannon. You're telling me my main danger is alien cooking?" Leora's laughter became a full-body vibration of amusement that sent Marcus spinning halfway across the pod. "Oh, you'll survive," she said. "If not, I'm afraid the galaxy will have one less sarcastic voice." Marcus paused, letting the humor diffuse some of the tension coiling in his chest. It was impossible not to notice, when someone could casually mention galactic casualties with a laugh, that negotiating survival required a very specific type of sanity, or a very specific type of stubbornness. He had both in equal measure. The chamber shifted. Panels and lights rearranged themselves with a soft sigh, as if the ship itself approved of, or was amused by, the unfolding interaction. Marcus noted that the floor was now lined with a translucent surface that hinted at the void outside, starfields stretching infinitely beneath him. It was beautiful and terrifying, and not particularly conducive to standing upright without tripping over your own arms. "So if I agree to be your sidekick or whatever," he said cautiously, "what does that entail? Endless tea ceremonies, space diplomatic lectures, cosmic karaoke?" Leora's eyes gleamed like twin moons reflecting starlight. "All of the above, and occasionally unexpected adventures in gravity anomalies. We have to maintain appearances. The humans must see you are alive. My court must see you are useful, and I enjoy your commentary." Marcus paused. "Commentary?" Leora leaned closer, ears brushing faintly against the air like tuning forks. "Yes, your human absurdities. They entertain me in ways even the most accomplished alien diplomats cannot." Hours or minutes passed in a blur of orientation exercises, introductions to the bioorganic ship, and accidental collisions with floating control panels. He met aides with skin like liquid crystal, engineers with extra limbs they twirled as if conducting invisible orchestras, and diplomats who could calculate probabilities with their eyes closed, but lacked basic common sense when offered a cup of tea. Through it all, Leora moved among them like a conductor orchestrating a symphony composed of politics, power, and peculiarities of zero-gravity life. Marcus couldn't help noticing that her long ears twitched when someone lied or exaggerated. It was inconveniently useful for a soldier trying to survive by avoiding both lies and lasers. By the time he was permitted a brief reprieve, Marcus floated by a viewport, staring at a nebula that pulsed in colors no human eye could have named before. Leora drifted beside him, ears brushing the edge of the window as she hummed something melodic, a tune that somehow made the stars feel closer. "You could go back to Earth, you know," she said quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You mean escape your charming hospitality and all this cosmic chaos?" Leora's lips twitched in a smile that threatened both danger and affection. "Perhaps, but freedom is complicated. Sometimes companionship is a choice more interesting." Marcus laughed, a sound that bounced off walls, floated in the pod, and probably carried into the ship's neural network. "Interesting is one way to put it. Insane might be another." Leora tilted her head, ears quivering like flags in a non-existent wind. "Both can be instructive." He shook his head, realizing that he was already ensnared not by chains or laser fire, but by the absurdity, humor, and subtle power of the alien queen with ears like cosmic antennae, whose every gesture made him wonder whether survival meant obeying, or whether it meant learning to navigate a universe where rules were suggestions, laughter was strategy, and zero gravity made even a simple bow a potential disaster. And for the first time since Zephyria III erupted into chaos, Marcus allowed himself to float a little easier. Because if he was going to be a sidekick to an alien queen, he might as well enjoy the view and maybe, just maybe, make her laugh in the process. Marcus woke to the gentle hum of the ship's neural core vibrating through the floor, if you could call it a floor, which on this bioorganic leviathan was more of a suggestion than a surface. Leora was already awake, perched on a floating platform of iridescent material that responded to her presence, her long ears tilted forward as she examined a display that shimmered in 3 dimensions like liquid light. "Good morning," she said without looking at him, voice playful but commanding. "I hope your dreams were not too terrestrial." "I dreamt I was being interrogated by space jellyfish with diplomas," Marcus muttered, trying to adjust to floating upright without bumping into the platform, the walls, or his own limbs. Leora's laugh echoed across the chamber, ears quivering like twin antennae. "Space jellyfish," she repeated, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "How human of you, it seems you carry your absurdity everywhere." Marcus floated closer, still cautious of the ship's unpredictable corridors which sometimes shifted when the mood struck them. "So, what's on the agenda today? Galactic politics? Interdimensional paperwork? Or another zero-gravity culinary experiment?" Leora finally turned to him, eyes glinting with mischief. "All of the above and perhaps a little espionage, but nothing lethal, probably." She tapped the holographic display, and a map of the human sector appeared, highlighting the embassies, military outposts, and suspiciously bland asteroid refineries. Their first meeting was with the Emperor's envoy, a being with translucent skin and 6 limbs that twitched nervously when calculating probabilities in real time. Marcus, still adjusting to being a participant in these interstellar negotiations rather than a foot soldier dodging bullets, couldn't help but note the absurdity of it all. A human soldier, captured, now floating midair beside a queen who could cause minor cosmic disturbances just by humming. The envoy spoke at length about trade routes, quantum tariffs, and minor disputes over asteroid mining rights. Every few minutes, Marcus muttered jokes under his breath which Leora, fortunately or unfortunately, heard. "You are relentless," she said during a pause, ears flicking. "Do you know that you are, in essence, a distraction?" Marcus shrugged. "Better that than a hostage, although given my luck I probably qualify as both." She laughed, a low, vibrating sound that made even the envoy glance nervously at her. Marcus smirked. "Don't worry, your alien majesty." I keep my chaos non-lethal, mostly. Leora's smile widened. Mostly is reassuring for now. After the negotiation, they toured the ship's core, a massive chamber of pulsating biocircuits and neural filaments that responded to touch, thought, and occasionally sarcasm. Careful, Leora said, gesturing at a filament that glimmered like liquid platinum. It has a sense of humor and does not forgive clumsy hands. Marcus reached out just to see if the filament would react. It pulsed and retracted, causing him to spin backward like a child testing a hornet's nest. Noted, he said, floating away. Leora's ears twitched in what could only be described as amusement. You may be reckless but entertaining. As the day progressed, Marcus was introduced to the court's engineers and aides, a collection of species with quirks so extreme they could have been inventions of a mad scientist's fever dream. One aide had the ability to project holograms from their fingertips, but had a tendency to accidentally overlay the human soldier with schematics for a gravity cannon. Another engineer's skin glowed when stressed, which, given the complexity of Marcus's jokes, was often. Leora observed quietly, allowing him to navigate these interactions, intervening only when a minor catastrophe seemed imminent. They had lunch, or whatever passed for lunch, in zero gravity, which involved floating protein spheres and liquid nutrients encased in small, transparent orbs. Marcus tried to eat without losing a sphere into the neural core while Leora watched, ears quivering. Do you humans always consume your sustenance with such clumsy enthusiasm? She asked. Marcus popped a sphere into his mouth and grimaced. Only on Tuesdays, and when floating inside living starships. Leora hummed a tune as if considering this carefully. Tuesday, noted. Evening arrived, or some approximation thereof, since the ship's artificial circadian rhythm was a suggestion more than a rule. Marcus found himself standing near a viewport, the stars stretching infinitely outside, glittering with unknown possibilities. Leora drifted beside him, ears brushing faintly against the edge of the window. Do you miss Earth? She asked, voice soft but curious. Marcus considered it. Sometimes, but Earth's bureaucracy and gravity are overrated, and well, this is a little more exciting than a Monday morning briefing at HQ. Leora's lips quirked. Exciting is a relative term, human, and yet here you are surviving it. Later, as Marcus attempted to rest, he was drawn into an impromptu experiment with anti-gravity training. Leora had designed a course that twisted physics, creating loops and spirals that required coordination, wit, and a sense of humor. If you crash into the walls, remember, she said, floating upside down herself, it will hurt less if you laugh. Marcus laughed anyway, but only after bouncing off a control panel, sending a holographic map into a swirl of lights that resembled a supernova gone rogue. Leora's ears flicked with approval. Progress, she declared, voice triumphant. By the end of the cycle, Marcus realized that survival in this environment depended less on strength or weaponry, and more on adaptability, humor, and the ability to tolerate a queen who found cosmic amusement in every minor disaster. He floated beside Leora as she hummed a tune, the ship responding in kind, a living orchestra of light, sound, and subtle gravitational anomalies. You are improving, she said, eyes glinting. Soon perhaps you will even be competent. Marcus smirked, or at least entertaining. Her laugh resonated through the ship, ears twitching with amusement. And for the first time since being captured, Marcus felt less like a prisoner and more like a participant in something vast, absurd, and utterly alien. The galaxy outside simmered with tension, alliances forming and dissolving like bubbles in a cosmic soda. Yet within the ship, in these floating corridors and laughing chambers, Marcus found a fragile equilibrium. Survival tinged with absurdity, danger softened by humor, and a companionship that neither star maps nor battle plans could predict. As the lights dimmed to mimic night, Marcus drifted near the neural core, ears straining to catch Leora's quiet humming. Tomorrow, he said, half to himself, half to her, I'm expecting more disasters disguised as training exercises. Leora's smile, reflected in the pulsing walls of the living ship, hinted that tomorrow would be worse, and that he would enjoy it anyway. Marcus floated through the ship's corridors with a familiarity that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. He knew which walls were likely to shift, which panels hummed with mood-sensitive circuitry, and which of Leora's aides would explode into a kaleidoscope of nervous light if he made a bad joke. He had become, in an absurd and terrifying way, part of the ship's rhythm, yet the galaxy outside had not waited for him to adapt. Signals flickered across the comm arrays. Human fleets repositioning, alien factions negotiating, and rumors of a rogue star cluster threatening trade routes. Marcus had spent months navigating chaos, but the stakes now pressed against him like gravity in a collapsing neutron star. Leora appeared beside him, floating as if she had no mass at all, ears tilting forward in a subtle but unmistakable gesture of alertness. "The humans are considering an ultimatum," she said, voice calm, though the slight twitch in her ears betrayed tension. "They assume you are still hostage. They have no idea you are functioning as my consultant." Marcus smirked. "Consultant? That sounds dangerously polite for someone about to tell them they're wrong." Leora's laugh echoed through the corridor, ears quivering. "Politeness is a form of diplomacy, your sarcasm less so." The meeting with the human envoy was set in the Grand Chamber, a space that defied gravity and expectation. Marcus floated beside Leora as she presided over the assembly, her long ears flicking whenever someone exaggerated or misrepresented facts. The humans were polite, formal, and surprisingly desperate, trying to assert authority over a situation they had no understanding of. Marcus could not resist whispering, "Do they always bring this much paperwork to a hostage negotiation?" Leora's low hum was approval. "It distracts me from the absurdity of their uniforms," she said. Negotiations began. Marcus observed the human representatives, noting their body language, their careful glances at the Queen, and their attempts to read him as if he were a cipher rather than a soldier-turned-advisor. Leora, in contrast, seemed entirely in control, weaving facts, threats, and humor into a tapestry that was impossible to unravel without her permission. At one point, a junior envoy tried to accuse her of violating interstellar treaty codes. Marcus muttered under his breath, "Interstellar etiquette, 1 part panic, 2 parts desperation, sprinkle with confusion." Leora's ears twitched in amusement, and she corrected the envoy with a melody that made his protest sound like a poorly tuned instrument. Hours passed, and the tension, while still present, was punctuated by moments of absurdity. Marcus pointed out a misalignment in the envoy's floating data panels, accidentally triggering a holographic display that turned the chamber into a virtual starfield. Leora's amusement was audible, and the envoy's confusion provided Marcus with a moment of tactical distraction. By the end of the session, compromises had been reached. Trade routes were adjusted, fleets repositioned, and a fragile, if imperfect, alliance between humans and the alien empire was secured. Once the humans departed, Marcus and Leora drifted to the observation deck, overlooking a nebula that shimmered in impossible colors. "You handled yourself well," she said, ears twitching slightly. "More than well, you were integral." Marcus laughed softly. "Integral? I thought my main skill was making terrible jokes at inappropriate times." Leora smiled. "Humor is underappreciated in diplomacy. It can be a weapon or a shield, you wield it both." Marcus considered her words. He remembered the terrified soldier who had awoken in a floating pod months ago, completely unprepared for alien culture, zero-gravity navigation, and a queen whose humor was as sharp as her power. Now he moved through the ship with confidence, anticipating the reactions of a crew unlike any he had ever known, blending strategy, wit, and empathy. He had learned patience, observation, and the art of surviving in environments where the rules were always changing. The choice remained: return to Earth, to comrades and a world that would likely never understand what he had endured, or stay aboard the living starship with Leora, whose companionship had become a strange but undeniable anchor. Marcus floated to the center of the observation deck, watching the stars drift by, feeling the subtle pull of loyalty, curiosity, and a connection that transcended species. Leora drifted close, eyes softening as her long ears brushed the surrounding air in a motion that conveyed reassurance and subtle amusement. "I could return," he said finally, "but I think I'd be trading one set of absurdities for another. And somehow this one feels right." Leora's smile was a mixture of triumph and relief, her ears flicking in a motion that Marcus now instinctively understood as joy. "Then you choose wisely," she said. "Not because I asked, but because it is your choice. Freedom is not simply departure, it is understanding where you belong." They floated side by side, a soldier and a queen, Amidst the